Please, don't take me back." These were the only words she managed to whisper through tears and soot, right there in the burning barn, before passing out in my arms. And let me tell you something, after 72 years walking this Texan land, I had seen it all. But that night in March changed everything. I'm Hank Morrison, 72 years old, and if you're watching from Texas, you know these dirt roads cutting through the north of Fort Worth. If you're watching from elsewhere, leave a comment letting me know where you're from. I'd love to know who's following this story. It was 3:47 a.m. when it all started. I remember the exact time because I always glance at the dashboard clock in my Silverado before heading out to check the fences. A storm had passed through the night before, one of those that shakes the ground and sends the cattle hiding under the oaks. Winds of nearly 80 miles per hour had knocked down 3 fence posts on the north side, and I needed to see the damage before sunrise. The road was as silent as an abandoned cemetery. Only the low rumble of the pickup's engine and the occasional creak of the tires on the damp gravel. The full moon hung in the sky like a silver coin forgotten by God, illuminating the pastures stretching as far as the eye could see. This is the Texas I love, vast, lonely, honest. That's when I saw the glow. An orange glow dancing on the horizon, far from the city lights. My first thought was a lightning strike hitting a tree. But as I got closer, it became clearer. It was fire. Big fire. I slammed the accelerator. The Silverado responded with a rough roar, kicking up a cloud of dust that glittered in the moonlight. My heart began to race. After 40 years of ranching, you learn that fire in the country can mean tragedy. The barn was about 2 miles from the Hendersons' property, a family that had moved to Dallas last year, leaving the land abandoned. It was one of those old wooden barns, the kind our grandparents built to last generations. Now, it was being devoured by flames like dry paper. I stopped the pickup about 50 meters away. The heat hit my face even from there. The flames were reaching at least 20 feet into the air, crackling and popping like bones breaking. The smell of burning wood mixed with old hay filled the air. That's when I heard it. A cry. Soft, almost drowned out by the sound of the fire, but it was there. A sound that pierced the soul. It wasn't ordinary despair, it was something deeper. It was pure pain turned into sound. "Is anyone there?" I shouted, jumping out of the pickup. The crying stopped for a second, as if the person had been startled by my voice. Then it started again, weaker, more broken. I grabbed the flashlight from the truck bed and started circling the barn. The structure was compromised, beams falling, but a part of the back was still standing. That's where the sound was coming from. "Don't come near," a female voice cried out through sobs. "Please, leave me here." My blood froze. It was a young voice, scared, desperate. "Miss, this barn is going to collapse." I yelled back. "You need to get out of there now." "No," she cried louder. "I deserve this. I deserve to burn." Let me stop for a second here. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button. It helps me a lot to keep bringing these real accounts to you. And stay until the end, because what happened next changed 2 lives forever. There was no time for conversation. I took off my leather jacket, the same one I've been wearing for 15 years, a gift from my late wife, Martha, and soaked it in a puddle of rainwater near the back entrance. The heat was unbearable as I entered the part that hadn't caught fire yet. Thick smoke like fog, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. The flashlight cut through the darkness in weak beams, revealing debris everywhere. She was cornered in the farthest corner, huddled like an injured animal. Even with all the soot covering her face, I could tell she was young, maybe in her 20s, too thin, with torn clothes that must have once been a blue dress. Her wide eyes shone like a deer caught in headlights. Come with me, now. I reached my hand out to her. She backed away even further, pressing her back against the wooden wall. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. They'll find me. They always find me. Who's going to find you? The family. She swallowed hard, and I could see pure fear written on her face. They're going to drag me back to that place. A huge beam cracked above us. There was no time left. Miss, I don't know who they are, but I promise you, no one is going to hurt you today. My word is gold in this region. I extended my hand again, this time with more firmness. Now come on. We need to get out of here before this roof falls down on us. She looked at my hand like it was a venomous snake. Then, slowly, she extended hers. Her fingers were cold as ice, trembling so much they could barely close around mine. I helped her stand. She staggered, clearly weak. I took off my wet jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Please, she murmured as we walked toward the exit, please, don't take me back. And then she passed out. I picked her up, she weighed less than a bale of hay, and ran out of the barn. 10 seconds later, the whole structure collapsed in a burst of sparks that shot up into the sky like macabre fireworks. I sat her on the passenger seat of the Silverado, cranked the heater up to full blast, and sat there, staring at that young stranger who had almost chosen to die burned rather than accept help. Don't take me back. The words echoed in my mind as I drove back home, carrying more questions than answers. Who was she? What family was she running from? And why the hell would she rather die than go back home? That early morning, driving down the silent roads of Texas with an unconscious stranger in the seat beside me, I didn't know I had just found the daughter I never had. And that this story was just beginning. If you want to know what happened when she woke up on my ranch, leave a comment asking for Chapter 2. This story still has many twists and turns ahead. 3 days. It was 3 full days that she stayed unconscious in the guest room of my house, and I swear on everything sacred, those were the 3 longest days of my life since I buried Martha 12 years ago. I'm Hank Morrison, and if you missed the first chapter, go back and watch it, because this story only makes sense if you understand how I found this young woman in a burning barn, whispering, "Please, don't take me back." And leave a comment if you've ever been in situations where you weren't sure if you were doing the right thing, because during those 3 days, I questioned every decision I made. My house is 15 miles from the nearest town, a wood and stone structure my father built in 1953, when Texas was wilder than civilized. 2 stories, with a porch that wraps around the front, with those white columns that Martha would paint every year before spring. The kind of house you see in movies about the South, you know? Where stories happen. The guest room is on the ground floor, overlooking the pastures where my 350 head of Angus cattle graze. Large windows with lace curtains that Martha handmade, a wrought iron bed that belonged to my grandmother, and a worn leather armchair where I spent those 3 entire nights, watching over a stranger. On the first day, I called Dr. Williams, the retired doctor who lives 10 miles away and still treats rural emergencies out of kindness. A man in his 70s, with white hair like cotton, who's been caring for people and animals with the same dedication for 4 decades. "Hank," he said after examining her, taking off his glasses and carefully cleaning them in the way old doctors do, "this girl isn't just exhausted. She's traumatized. Look at the marks on her wrists." And that's when I saw them. Purple marks, almost healed, as if she had been tied up. Repeatedly. "There's more," Dr. Williams continued, his voice low and serious. "Scars on her back. Old ones. Whoever did this to her made torture a routine." My blood boiled. In 72 years, few things make me lose my composure, but seeing someone hurt a child, because that's what she was, a scared child, touches something primal inside me. What do I do, doctor? Let her wake up in her own time. Don't push anything. And when she's ready to talk. He placed his hand on my shoulder. You listen. Just listen. On the second night, she started having nightmares. Muffled screams, as if she was trying not to make a sound. Jumbled words I could catch. No, please, I'll be good, don't hurt me anymore. Every time I would get up to check, she was sweating cold, twisting between the sheets like she was fighting invisible ropes. I'd stand by the door, not knowing whether to go in or respect her space. Martha always knew what to do at times like these. Me? I'm just an old farmer who knows more about cattle than human trauma. But on the third night, something changed. It was almost 2 in the morning when I heard barefoot steps in the kitchen. I slowly got up from the armchair, bones creaking like old hinges, and went to investigate. She was standing in front of the fridge, wearing one of the flannel shirts I had left in the dresser for her. The shirt was huge on her thin little body, almost reaching her knees. Brown hair messily falling over her shoulders, eyes still swollen from sleep and tears. "Excuse me," she whispered when she saw me, her voice hoarse as if she hadn't used it in weeks. "I was just thirsty." "You don't need to ask permission in my kitchen," I replied, opening the fridge and grabbing a glass of milk. "Warm milk helps you sleep." My Martha always said that. I warmed the milk on the stove, one of those old gas stoves that makes noise when you light it. She sat down at the kitchen table, a solid oak table my father made with his own hands, and stared out the window into the darkness outside. "My name is Ellie," she said after a long silence. "Ellie Parker." "Nice to meet you, Ellie. I'm Hank Morrison." "I know." She took a sip of the warm milk, and I saw a tear roll down her face. "You saved me." Any decent person would have done the same. She shook her head slowly. "No. You don't understand. No one's ever saved me before." And then she started to tell me. Let me pause here for a second. If you're following this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories of overcoming need to be told. And stay until the end of this chapter, because what Ellie told me that night completely changed my perspective on the evil that can hide in the heart of Texas. "I grew up in a community," she began, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Far from here, near the border with New Mexico. They called themselves the Chosen Family. To the outside world, we were just a conservative church, you know? Simple people living off the land." She stopped to take a deep breath, as if preparing herself to dive into deep waters. But inside it was hell. The leader was named Pastor Samuel, a man she described as having eyes that looked like black holes and a smile that froze the blood. He controlled everything: what they ate, what they wore, who they spoke to, where they slept. "Girls like me," she continued, her voice getting weaker, "we were promised to the older men when we turned 16. It was considered an honor. A blessing from God." My coffee cup trembled in my hands. "How old are you, Ellie?" 20. I was promised to Pastor Samuel when I turned 16. He already had 3 wives, but he wanted a 4th. One he could shape. The anger I felt in that moment was like a fire consuming everything inside me. But I kept my voice calm because she needed to speak. "How did you escape?" "I tried many times," she said, wiping away the tears with the sleeve of her shirt. "Every time they caught me, the punishment was worse. Whippings. Days without food. One time, they locked me in the basement for 2 weeks. She showed me the scars on her wrists. These are from when they tied me to the church, in front of everyone, to exorcise the demon of rebellion out of me. Jesus Christ, I whispered. 3 weeks ago, I found out they were going to marry me off to Pastor Samuel on Sunday. A special ceremony, with all the families in the region attending. She looked me straight in the eye. I preferred to die than let him touch me again. Again? The silence that followed was deafening. And I understood. That's why you were in that barn, I said quietly. I set fire to it after hiding there for 2 days. I thought if I died in the flames, at least I would die free. She laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, without joy. Irony, huh? Trying to escape hell, and almost killed myself in literal flames. I stretched my hand across the table, and after hesitating, she placed hers on top. Cold fingers, still trembling. Ellie, I said with all the firmness an old Texan farmer can muster in his voice, while you're under my roof, no one is going to lay a finger on you. And that's not a promise, it's a sacred vow. She cried then. Cried like a child who had finally found a safe place to let all the pain out. And right there, in that kitchen lit only by the light over the stove, with the sound of crickets outside and the ticking of the wall clock, I knew my solitary life was over. I had found my daughter. In the next chapter, you'll find out how Ellie began to heal on the ranch and how the men from the cult came after her. The story is just heating up. I had never seen the sunrise by my own choice. Ellie told me this one morning in April, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the golden horizon spread across the pastures. And you know what that means? It means that for the first time in her life, no one was controlling when she had to wake up, where she should be, or how she should feel. I'm Hank Morrison, and if you're just tuning in, go back and watch the previous chapters, because you need to understand the journey that brought this young woman here. And if you've been following from the beginning, leave a like to help me keep telling this story that changed my life forever. It had been 5 weeks since Ellie had been on the farm, and watching her transform was like seeing a flower bloom after a harsh winter. But the path to that point wasn't easy. The first weeks were full of extreme care. She flinched at any loud noise, the gate slamming, the truck engine starting, even when I bumped into a pot in the kitchen. I could see the fear in her eyes, as if she was always waiting for a punishment that never came. Ellie, I said one morning while I was making scrambled eggs, she had gotten too thin, needed to eat properly, how about you help me with the horses today? She looked at me as if I had suggested she fly to the moon. I've never ridden a horse, she admitted, nervously tugging at the hem of her shirt. In the community, only the men were allowed. Well, I smiled, flipping the eggs in the pan. Here on this farm, I make the rules. And rule number 1 is that everyone who lives here learns how to ride. That's how her real healing began. I took her to the barn, a red wooden structure my grandfather built in 1932, with 8 stalls and the smell of fresh hay that always reminded me of my childhood. My horses are pure quarter horses, work animals bred to handle cattle, but gentle as big dogs when treated with respect. This one's Thunder, I said, introducing her to my 15-year-old bay stallion. He's as stubborn as a mule, but he's got a heart of gold. Ellie hesitantly extended her hand. Thunder sniffed her, snorted softly, and nudged his nose into her palm. And then something magical happened. She smiled. The first real smile I had seen on her since I found her. He's beautiful, she whispered, stroking the animal's neck. And this is Stella, I continued, showing her a younger Palomino mare. She'll be your teacher. In the following days, I taught Ellie everything a Texan farmer knows. How to brush the horses, how to saddle them, how to balance on horseback. She fell off 3 times in the first week, dust, laughter, and a few words that Martha would have disapproved of. But every time she got up, I saw more determination in her eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked one afternoon after she managed to gallop for the first time. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair tousled by the wind, looking like a completely different person. "Because this is how family is treated," I replied without thinking. The silence that followed was filled with emotion. She dismounted from Stella, came over to where I was leaning on the fence, and for the first time, gave me a hug. A tight, desperate hug, as if she were clinging to the first good thing that had ever happened in her life. "I never had a father," she whispered into my shoulder. "And I never had a daughter," I responded, my voice thick with emotion. "Seems like God has a sense of humor." The weeks passed like flowing water. Ellie learned how to rope, terrible at first, but persistent like a true Texan. She learned how to drive my old Silverado on the dirt roads, singing along to country songs she had never heard before. She learned to cook on the wood stove, plant in the garden, and tell the difference between a sick cow and a healthy one. But mostly, she learned how to laugh. And then they showed up. It was a Thursday in May, a blue sky with not a cloud in sight, when I saw the dust rising on the access road. 3 black cars, those sedans that screamed serious business from a distance. My stomach tightened. "Ellie," I yelled to her, who was in the corral practicing with the rope. "Get inside." "No." She looked at the approaching cars, and the blood drained from her face. "They found me. Go inside and lock yourself in my room. Don't come out until I come for you." She ran like her life depended on it. And maybe it did. The cars stopped in front of the porch. 7 men got out, all dressed in black, with that fanatical religious look you see in horror movies. The one in front was tall, thin, with eyes that looked like 2 burned holes in his face. I didn't need introductions to know who he was. Pastor Samuel. "Good afternoon," he said in a greasy voice that sent shivers down my spine. "We're looking for a young woman who fled our community. Ellie Parker. We have reason to believe she's here." Let me be clear about something, folks. If any of you are watching this and someone ever comes to your property to intimidate a defenseless person, remember what I did that day. Because some situations in life require us to take a firm stand. "This is private property," I said, slowly stepping down the porch stairs, like a predator measuring its prey. "And you're not welcome here." "Mr. Morrison," another man spoke, consulting a piece of paper, "we know you're hiding her. She belongs to us. It's our spiritual responsibility to bring her back home. She belongs to no one but herself." Pastor Samuel gave a smile that made my blood freeze. "You don't understand our faith, friend. Ellie made a sacred commitment with us. She's going to be my wife, as God has commanded." It was then that I lost my composure. "Listen here, you sons of bitches," I growled, stepping closer. At 72 years old, I might not be the man I once was, but 40 years of dealing with 1-ton bulls taught me not to back down. That young lady is of age, was abused by you people, and is now under my protection. If you set foot on this property again, I guarantee you'll be carried out." "You're interfering with God's will," Pastor Samuel said, his voice rising in pitch. "Then God and I will have a private conversation later. Now get off my land." For a moment, I thought they might try something. 7 against 1 wasn't favorable odds. But then I heard the sound that saved the day, the sound of police sirens approaching. Ellie had called 911 from my room. Sheriff Martinez arrived with 2 deputies, and when I told the story, showing Ellie's scars, explaining the forced marriages, the abuse, everything, his face turned red with rage. "Gentlemen," he said to Pastor Samuel's group, "You have 5 minutes to leave the county or I'll arrest you for attempted kidnapping and harassment." And they left. Like rats fleeing a sinking ship. 2 weeks later, Ellie testified in federal court. The chosen family was investigated, dismantled, and Pastor Samuel is serving 20 years in prison for child abuse and forced marriages. The night we heard the verdict, Ellie and I were on the porch, watching the stars appear in the Texas sky. "Hank," she said, her voice firm for the first time since I met her, "I want to study. I want to graduate in social work and help other girls like me." "Then that's what we'll do," I replied. "I've already looked into distance learning. We can start next week." She took my hand, not cold and trembling anymore, but firm and determined. "Thank you for saving me," she said. "Thank you for letting me be your father," I responded. And that's how a tragedy turned into a miracle. A broken young woman became strong, and a lonely old man found a reason to live. In the final chapter, you'll discover how Ellie achieved her dream and how our story changed the lives of hundreds of others. Get ready for a conclusion that will move you. It all started when someone heard my cry in a barn. These were the words Ellie Morrison said into the microphone at the inauguration of the New Roots Shelter Center 3 years after I found her in that burning barn. And yes, you heard that right, Ellie Morrison. Because in Texas, family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by your side when the world falls apart. I'm Hank Morrison, I'm 75 now, and this is the final part of the story that changed 2 lives forever. If you've been following along, get ready for the most emotional ending you've ever seen. And if anyone you know needs to hear this message of hope, share this story, because it could save a life. October 2024. Harvest Festival on our property, a tradition I revived after Ellie brought color back to my life. The farm was unrecognizable, string lights hung between the ancient oaks, long wooden tables spread across the yard, the smell of Texas barbecue mixing with the fragrance of the last autumn flowers. More than 200 people had come. Neighbors from 3 counties, friends Ellie made at university, other survivors she had helped over the years, and even some journalists who wanted to document our story. But the most important thing was happening in the center of the yard, the inauguration ceremony of the shelter center Ellie had built on the neighboring property, the same one where I found her 3 years ago. Where there had once been rubble and bad memories, now stood a beautiful building made of brick and wood, 2 connected houses that could accommodate up to 20 young women fleeing abusive situations. Well-maintained gardens, a community garden, horse therapy stables, and an office where Ellie, now graduated in social work from the University of North Texas, coordinated a support network that extended across the state. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor of Fort Worth began his speech, "it is an honor to be here today to officially open the New Roots Shelter Center, an institution that has already saved 17 lives in its first 6 months of unofficial operation." Applause echoed across the property. I was in the front row, wearing my best suit, the same one I wore at Martha's wedding 42 years ago, with my heart bursting with pride. But none of us would be here today, the mayor continued, without the extraordinary courage of the woman who turned her own tragedy into hope for others. With you, the director and founder of New Roots, Ellie Morrison. She walked up to the small stage we set up near the largest oak on the property. 3 years had completely transformed the scared young woman I found in that barn. Now, Ellie was 23 years old, brown hair cascading in waves over her shoulders, wearing a blue dress that highlighted her firm, determined eyes. But what had changed the most wasn't her appearance, it was her posture. She walked like someone who knew exactly who she was and where she wanted to go. "Hello, everyone," she began, her clear and strong voice echoing through the sound system. "Some of you have known me for years. Others are meeting me today. But all of you are here because you believe in one simple thing: that every person deserves a safe place to call home. Dead silence. Even the crickets seemed to be paying attention. 3 years ago, I was ready to die. The brutal honesty of the words cut through the air like a blade. I had escaped a cult that had controlled me since I was a child, where I was physically and psychologically abused, where I was going to be forced to marry a man who saw women as property. Murmurs of indignation and compassion spread through the crowd. That night, I set fire to an abandoned barn and locked myself inside, because I believed that was what I deserved. That there was no hope for someone like me. That the world would be better off without me. Tears began to roll down my face. Even after all this time, imagining what she almost did still affected me. But it all started when someone heard my cry in a barn. She looked directly at me, smiling through her own tears. A man with a big heart who could have just gone on his way, pretended he didn't hear, continued his solitary and comfortable life. She paused, wiping her eyes. Instead, Hank Morrison risked his own life to save a stranger. And he didn't stop there. He gave me something I never had, a real family. A father who protected me, taught me, loved me unconditionally, and showed me that I was worth more than any trauma from my past. The crowd erupted into applause. I tried to hide, but several people turned to look at me, clapping as if I were some sort of hero. Hero, my foot, I just did what any decent person would do. But the story doesn't end there, Ellie continued when the applause died down. Because I discovered that my experience, as terrible as it was, could be transformed into something powerful. In 3 years, our support network has already rescued 47 young women from abusive situations. We have partnerships with the federal police, study programs to help the girls get their lives back on track, specialized therapy, and yes. She smiled, horseback riding classes. Loving laughter spread through the crowd. Today, we are officially inaugurating the new Roots Center. But the name is not just poetic, it's literal. Because all of us who arrived here had our original roots poisoned. Families that hurt us, communities that betrayed us, people who were supposed to protect us but destroyed us. Her voice gained strength, turning almost into a roar. Because everyone deserves a family that chooses to love.